Welcome to another edition of the Big News Roundup. I'm Bill Thomas, and here's what's happening right now. A leading voice for Democrats says it's time for Ilhan Omar to leave the Democratic Party. Minnesota's Walz administration using taxpayer money to pay medical leave for tear-gassed protesters. President Trump weighs an executive order to declare a national emergency and take over the midterm elections. And a couple of Hollywood legends reemerge after a long hiatus, each of them looking completely unrecognizable. It's amazing. All this and a bunch more is coming up right now on the Big Roundup. We have a great deal to get to today, and we begin here. A video of a top Democratic consultant urging Ilhan Omar to spare the Democrats her misery and form her own political party is now picking up steam following her repeated inappropriate outbursts during this week's State of the Union address. I said it right here yesterday on this program, and I'll say it again. Madam Omar, moving forward, always sit down and be quiet. The newly viral podcast clip was first recorded last year by longtime Democratic consultant James Carville after a number of previous controversial comments made by the Somalia-born lawmaker had just resurfaced. In particular, Carville was reacting to an interview Omar did several years earlier in which she argues that our entire country should be much more afraid of white men because, in her words, they're causing most of the deaths within the U.S. Someone needs a timeout. Apparently, that single repugnant quip was finally the straw that broke the camel's back for the lifelong Democrat who then worked himself into a complete lather while railing against the Minnesota congresswoman and accusing her of waging an unwinnable political war on nearly one-third of all American voters. How to win friends and influence people. Practically foaming at the mouth, he goes on to say that running a nasty campaign against any specific gender, ethnicity, race, or religion is something the vast majority of Democrats don't ever want to do, before noting that, unfortunately, it's impossible to get that message across to stubborn, far-left progressives like Omar because they simply refuse to allow anyone to help them at all. And as you know, Miss Omar needs more help than pretty much anybody. In a furious closing rant, he then says that if they have any guts at all, it's time for Lady Omar and her radical pals to get the heck out of his beloved Democratic Party and start up a political party of their own, adding that down the road they'd be free to caucus with Democrats whenever the dust eventually settles. However, so you know, that dust will never settle. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown, and here's the real deal. There is no bigger fan of upside-down, convoluted, corrupt, ill-intentioned, divisive liberal politics than James Carville. And in case you forgot, he's the knucklehead who helped Bill Clinton score the White House win back in 1992. You'll recall the goofy campaign message. I think it was, "It's the economy, you blockheads." I don't know. Editor Pranav the Magnificent, cut number 92, please.
It's the economy, stupid.
I was pretty close. Now, look, I'm no fan of the guy they used to call the Ragin' Cajun, but the bottom line is he knows a thing or two about the body politic, and as a general rule, when Brother Carville speaks, people listen. Most people listen. Almost everybody listens. Unfortunately, there's one clueless little creature who's tone-deaf, tuned out, self-absorbed, and far too narcissistic to hear his words and heed his warning. Yeah, that one, Ilhan Omar. So, you know, as far to the left as Mr. Carville is, even he might acknowledge that the ill one is a nasty, festering wound, maybe even a cancer on Team Blue, which he has spent his entire life trying to build up. For all his efforts, she's an outsider. With a warped mind, an axe to grind, a corrupt agenda as well, and left to her devices, she will lead the Democrats down the road to political destruction. You know, a moment ago, I alluded to the fact that the dishonorable congressional disaster, Ilhan Omar, my little bucket of sunshine, my little bucket of vitamin D, she is clueless, tone-deaf, tuned out, and some other stuff. I forgot. I got a great memory. It's just kind of short. You'll also recall that she made a fool of herself at this week's State of the Union address by screaming like a love-struck teenager at a Beatles concert and pestering the grown-ups in the room. She's one class act. Now, for our colleagues on the left side of the aisle, that side, if this is really the best you have to offer up, you'd do well to just wave the white flag, forfeit, surrender, run for cover, and look, make it easy on everybody. Simply call it a day. Turning now to the latest example of jaw-dropping administrative incompetence by Minnesota's governor fraud, Tim Walz, and his hopelessly inept team of misfits. In a scene straight out of The Twilight Zone, members of the Walz administration are now admitting that their state is currently using taxpayer money to pay for the medical leave of agitators who were inadvertently exposed to tear gas at their rowdy anti-ICE demonstrations. Yeah, truth is kind of goofier than friction. During a recent meeting with state lawmakers, a Walz team official from Minnesota's Department of Employment and Economic Development revealed that right about now, they're receiving a number of applications for paid benefits, all relating to the violence that resulted from recent ICE operations in the area. Astonishingly, he goes on to claim it makes perfect sense that people who suffered serious injuries during those protests would apply for assistance. Furthermore, he doubles down by pointing out that one significant benefit of having this kind of program in the first place is that people who are seriously injured now have the ability to receive aid and take time off to heal. Meanwhile, another Walz appointee is actually in charge of the entire paid family and Medicaid leave program, and he confirms that his agency, indeed, now receiving a considerable number of applications from people with a variety of serious health concerns who are listing Operation Metro Surge as a meaningful contributing factor to their need for paid leave. Well, give me some of that paid leave. I'll say that I was pretend hurt right here from California. Additionally, he admits that there currently seems to be a large amount of confusion on the part of healthcare providers, insurance companies, patients, and more when it comes to how this state program works regarding conditions, all attributed to the effects of Operation Metro Surge, saying that right now it's kind of hard to quantify how it's all going to add up in the end. In other words, $9 billion and counting. Price tag keeps going up and up. In case you're wondering, people who are enrolled in Minnesota's state-run medical leave program, they're entitled to receive substantial payments for up to 12 weeks each year, meaning that if they play their cards right, and in Minnesota they always do, tear-gassed protesters can treat themselves to a nearly 3-month paid vacation. I got to move to Minnesota. Cold winters, but tons of free junk. In the meantime, Governor Walz keeping busy by unveiling a new slate of pretend proposals aimed at curbing fraud in his state, including a bunch of bills designed to improve detection, also investigation, and more. File that one under too little, too late. Mission failed, you big lughead. Final thoughts, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. Here's the way I see it, and I've always said this. The best gift in the world is the gift that keeps on giving. And for that, today and every day, the gift giver in charge, marvelous Minnesota. Good to know that the Walz administration is going to pony up a big fat wad of dough for folks who put the lives of federal law enforcement agents at risk. Governor Tim Walz, you're the best at what you do. You're a real winner. For crying out loud, if I knew I could score a juicy payday and some time off work simply by planting myself in the middle of a dangerous Department of Homeland Security mission, I would have flown myself down to Walsneyland, put on my little News Roundup rioter hat, and taken one for the team. Now look, over the years, I've taken a beating. Jimmy Johnson belted me in the nose in 5th grade. I think I stole his girlfriend. I've fallen off motorcycles a few times over the years, even took a pretty good shot to the ribs in my karate class one night a few years back. Sadly, I didn't get time off or a cash handout from any of those capers, so if taking a drop or two of tear gas in my peepers is going to score me a paid vacation, it's a no-brainer, man. Sign me up. By the way, if you're a Minnesota taxpayer, be comfortable in the knowledge that your hard-earned tax dollars, what little is left after all the fraud in that state, it's now being put to even more fraudulent use by your elected officials. They're outright giving your money to law-breaking rioters who had a grand time in recent weeks trying to destroy a good chunk of your very own state. Hey, recapping now, Minnesota, they are, in fact, the gift that just keeps on giving. I'll switch things up now and turn our attention to an alarming new report which claims that President Trump is preparing to declare a national emergency in order to assume total control over the upcoming midterm elections. They're going to be here lickety-split. According to the Washington Post, right now, a MAGA activist group is working in conjunction with the White House and circulating the draft of an executive order which claims that China interfered in the 2020 election. The draft goes on to say that as a result, the president has justification to declare a national emergency when it comes to voting, and therefore he also has the right to unleash extraordinary presidential power. And that's when it comes to the upcoming election. Additionally, the Post report indicates that because President Trump has already been preparing a different plan for the midterms, which would require voter ID and ban mail-in ballots, his supporters are hoping that he'll simply incorporate the contents, in his new draft, into that prior executive order as well. And in the meantime, proponents of that new draft, they claim that our nation is currently facing a situation where foreign adversaries are actively interfering with our elections, and that as a result, our commander-in-chief has an obligation to execute their order in an effort to safeguard the vote. Now, as most of us know by now, President Trump has repeatedly questioned the integrity of our country's elections. Also argues that Republicans should nationalize voting throughout the entire U.S., while promising to take matters into his own hands if Congress refuses to pass a bill requiring voter ID. Final thoughts, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. It's all pretty basic. The fix is in, and here's what's up. It's no big secret that we have a number of problems with voting here in the USA, and by all accounts, the way I see it, the system is rigged. We all know that. In my estimation, Democrats with their failed policies, they know full well that they cannot win regional or national elections, so they bend the rules, tweak the system, cheat legally or otherwise, and do all they can to glom on to power and control. It's all about the power. They opened the borders during the last administration, and if 10 million people entered the U.S. illegally, in theory, they just granted themselves tons and tons, millions and millions of potential votes. Yeah, sometimes illegal votes, they count as votes. It's good to be a Democrat, I guess. Fortunately, Republicans have turned that voting spigot off by securing the border, deporting criminal illegal immigrants, and doing what they can to square things up once elections come a-calling. Many blue states, as you know, they're redistricting just in time for the midterms, and it's all part of the game, the big scam. But wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah, there's always a bunch more. Democrats are dead set against voter ID, as that could siphon away a large chunk of their voter base. So the SAVE Act has them absolutely up in arms. And mail-in ballots, yeah, they should be used sparingly, if at all. This is, in fact, a national emergency. Voting has got to be fair, but the Democrats will pull out all the stops in their effort to manipulate the vote, score some big wins during the midterms, try to steal the White House too, and all in their effort to dismantle the United States. Outside of that, I say nothing to worry about. It's all going to be okay. All right, branch out just a bit and turn to a troubling story involving artificial intelligence, global repression, and a major blunder by the Chinese Communist Party. A leading AI company has just released a new report which reveals that a worldwide spy network run by the Chinese Communist regime is actively using Chatgpt as part of their brutal plot, all to track down and intimidate political dissidents all across the entire planet. The company OpenAI, we've all heard of OpenAI, says they discovered the scheme when a lone Chinese official made a mistake that accidentally exposed the ploy after he tried to target the Prime Minister of Japan. After looking into the user's account further, they unearthed what they call well-resourced and meticulously orchestrated covert cyber operations against both domestic and foreign adversaries of the Chinese Communist Party. Furthermore, they say the effort appears to be part of a large-scale operation involving hundreds of staff members, thousands of fake online accounts, and more, all designed to target critics of the CCP by hitting them with everything, everywhere, and get this, obviously, all at once. Moving along, some additional headlines that we're also keeping a very close watch on here in the News Roundup newsroom before we venture off into the weekend. First up, in New York, former President Bill Clinton testifies before the House Oversight Committee regarding his relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. And Bubba telling Congress that his acquaintance with Epstein was brief, that he saw nothing out of the ordinary, and that he did nothing wrong as well. Well, tell us what you're thinking. Was he lying when he should have ought to been truthing? Leave us a comment, and we're just kind of curious. What are your thoughts? Moving along, in a bit of alarming news for the few remaining diehard fans of CNN, the good old Cartoon News Network. MAGA-aligned billionaires Larry Ellison and his baby boy, his son David, they've just won a bidding war for Paramount Skydance to take over the news channel's parent company, Warner Brothers Discovery, with sweeping changes now likely on the horizon. In other words, so long, Wolfie, so long, Wolf Blitzer, your gravy train is coming to a stop. And in Washington, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem claims that deep state employees in the department have been secretly spying on her by tapping into her phone and her computer. And she says Elon Musk helped her track down the culprits, and that as a result, she's now stumbled upon a secret spy room on her campus as well. Kind of sounds like an episode of Get Smart. It's actually her fault. She should have just put into use the good old cone of silence. That works every time. And now, a quick gander at a bit of showbiz news, and we kick things off today with a rare public appearance by a legendary Hollywood superstar who's now completely unrecognizable. 64-year-old funny man Jim Carrey looking every bit the Joker while accepting an honorary Caesar Award in France, gushing over his family while sparking rumors that he's possibly had a recent bit of plastic surgery as well. Well, maybe just a little bit. Hey, here's the deal. I'm not entirely sure that's Jim Carrey, and it actually looks a bit more like a goofy combination of Scarlett Johansson and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Something has gone terribly wrong here. In any event, if that is in fact him, and is not, congratulations on winning some kind of goofy trophy from the French Foreign Legion or somebody in France. I don't know. I wasn't paying that close attention. Also, I do want to take this time to congratulate Jim Carrey in French, but I can't speak a word of French. So I'll just say au revoir, monsieur. Not to be outdone, another comedy legend also resurfacing after years away from the limelight, and he's barely recognizable as well. The world's favorite oversized elf, that guy, Will Ferrell, emerging from his trailer in total disguise and looking a bit like a shaggy hippie on the set of his new flick, The Fifth Wheel. The Vegas set project includes co-star Kim Kardashian as well. And once again, I'm not entirely sure that's Will Ferrell, and he actually looks a bit more like a combination of Chewbacca and Betty Davis. In any event, I'm a big fan of the anchorman from San Diego, or is it San Diego?
San Diego.
San Diego. And I'll be the first in line to see that new movie when it finally comes out. But somebody should have told them friends don't let friends make movies with Kim Kardashian. On the other hand, maybe Carrot Top and Gary Busey weren't available. And with that, time to call it a wrap on the Big News Roundups. Have an awesome day today. Enjoy the weekend. Please stay safe. If you haven't done so already, it's pretty basic. It's right there. You got to hit that subscribe button. Tell your friends to subscribe as well. With that, we're going to dim the lights and fade to black, and we'll see you right back here next time for a brand new episode of the Big News Roundup.